Hello friends! Today we are gonna complete the full-stack school management application using Next.js. When we first visit the website, we have to log in, otherwise we won't be able to access the dashboard, because all these pages are protected. In the application, we have 4 different user roles: admin, teacher, student, and parent. For each role, there are different dashboards and limitations. Let's log in as an admin. This is the admin dashboard, and we'll fetch all this data from the database. Using this component, we can change the date and we can see the events scheduled for that specific day. Here we have the announcements, and on the menu we can see all the list pages: teachers, students, parents. And for the list pages, we'll implement pagination, which will improve the page speed and decrease the number of database requests. We'll also implement a search functionality, and for each table, we'll be able to search through different columns. We can search for the subject name, the teacher name, or the class name. As an admin, we can see all the pages, we can delete items, update them, or we can create a new item. In the form components, we'll be using React Hook Form, and you'll see how easy it is to validate inputs without causing unnecessary re-renders. Let's create a teacher. We also have a single teacher page where we can see all the details and teacher's lessons. We can update the user information, and here there are some shortcuts that open the related list page with custom filters applied. So you'll learn how to fetch data using search params. Let's log out and log in as a teacher. On the dashboard, we can see all our lessons. As you realize, we don't have all the items on the menu, and even if I try to reach them, I'll be redirected to the home page because we'll be using Next.js middleware to protect routes based on user roles. There are no action buttons anymore, and we cannot add or change the items except for the exams, assignments, and results, because we can see here only our items, not other teachers. Let's log in as a student. We can see here the class schedule, and right now we have only a few items here, and on the list pages we'll see only our data. And as a parent, again, we'll be able to see the children's schedules, their exams, results, and events. For this tutorial, we'll be using Postgres, but you can choose any database you want because we'll be using Prisma ORM. So it doesn't matter which database you are using, the syntax will be the same. We'll also use Docker, and you'll learn how to create and deploy any database or any application in just 5 minutes. After creating our application, we'll deploy it using Hostinger. As you know, it's the hosting sponsor of the channel, and I create applications with different technologies every month using Hostinger, and for this project we'll be using VPS hosting. But don't worry, you won't have to deal with any configuration. Hostinger installs everything you need in a minute. And all these servers are super fast because they use the latest NVMe SSDs and one of the most powerful CPUs. So you can deploy all your applications and websites on a single server. Let's choose the most popular one, and if you use the link in the description and LlamaDev coupon code here, you'll get an extra discount. After purchasing, you are ready to set up your server. Let's choose a location. You can install any of these control panels, but for this tutorial I'll just install Docker because I also want to deploy my database server. Let's give the server password and finish the setup. It's gonna take a while, and after that it will be ready to deploy your applications. So if you are ready, let's create our app and database and deploy them here. Okay, this is our previous Next.js application which has all the UI designs. And in this tutorial, we are going to build the backend. If you didn't watch the previous tutorial, I highly recommend you watch it first, because it's not only HTML and CSS. We created here reusable table, we used this calendar library, and we created all these animated charts. And most importantly, we created this form component that shows different forms for each list. And inside the forms, we used React hook form and the Zod validation. Of course, we are going to take care of here from scratch because we will have the database schema. But anyway, we learned tons of different things in the previous lesson. But if you still want to skip that video, you can find the entire source code in the last video description. Just visit this GitHub repository, copy this link, and clone this project. After cloning, just install the libraries by writing npm install. And after installing dependencies, you can run your application. Npm run dev. Okay. But before creating the backend, let me show you the main structure of the application. I'm going to create here my Next.js application. And inside our application, we have three main elements. We have the app router, the components, and server actions. In the previous lesson, we designed our pages inside the app folder, and we designed our form components inside the components folder. And right now, using these pages and forms, we'll be able to fetch or change the data. To do that, we are going to need a database. Let me create somewhere here. I'll say database. And using the pages, we'll fetch data from the database. For example, on the admin page, we will fetch all this chart data, and for the list pages, we'll fetch all these items. So let's say data fetching, which means get requests. And when we want to delete any item, or when we want to add a new item, we are going to be using these forms, and we are going to call the server actions. And it's going to connect to our database and mutate the data. So it can be a post, update, or delete request. This is important because I see some people try to fetch data in the server actions, but just don't do that. Server actions are for the mutation. If you want to fetch data, use your server components. And for all these database operations, we'll be using Prisma ORM. So first, we are going to connect to Prisma and we will make the requests, and it will take the requests and send them to our database. It will get the answers and return the responses. In this case, doesn't matter which database you are using, the syntax will be the same. So you can use here your favorite database, but for this tutorial, we'll be using Postgres because it was the most desired database in the previous video's comments. So you can write what projects you want to see in the next tutorial. I'm gonna read all of your comments. Okay, here is gonna be CRUD operations. And right now we can design our database schema. To do that, let's use this AI tool, so it's gonna be easier. Let's move this here, choose the relationship, and write here what we want to create. Create a school management app database schema. There will be admin and teachers. Each teacher can have multiple subjects, lessons, and classes. And in each class, there will be students. A student has a parent, grade, class, exam or assignment results, and attendance. Parents can have multiple children. Each grade has multiple students and classes. Each class has a grade, a supervisor, which is a teacher, multiple students, and lessons. A lesson has a class, subject, teacher, multiple exams and assignments. And each exam and assignment has a result. In the attendance table, the student will be present or absent for the given lesson. Okay, you can give more details, but let's generate. It's creating our schema. And it's ready. Let's see what we have. As you can see, a same subject can belong to different teachers, and using those subjects, we'll be able to create different lessons. Here is important because for different classes, we'll give different lessons but the same subject. Let's say Jane and John are history teachers, but Jane is going to class 1A and John is going to class, let's say 2B, for example. And inside the class, we'll have the supervisor, which is a teacher. We'll have the students. Each student has a parent, but a parent can have different children in the same school. Attendance list. The status will be absent or present. So we can keep track of this student for each lesson. And also we can create exams and assignments for different lessons. And they are going to have this result table, which includes the exam or assignment ID, user ID, and the score. So this was pretty accurate. Of course, we are going to add some more fields like student surname, email, phone, but they are not our concern right now because the important part is the relationships. If you want to enter something different, just double click, choose the code, and add here whatever you want to add. And it's type. This is how it works. And you can check the relationships. And this is the main structure of our application. So let's install Prisma and create our database. And after that, I'm going to show you the authentication part. Firstly, I'm going to open prisma.io. Let's get started. Let me zoom in. And let's choose our database. These are just examples. You can choose pretty much everything. And we already have our application. Let's install Prisma. I'll open my terminal. npm install Prisma. And after that, we are going to initialize using npx prisma init. And as you realize, it created here a new folder called Prisma, and inside we have the schema. Provider is the database provider, and here we are going to have the connection URL. Let's check the env file. As you can see, it added this database URL. For now, we don't have any database, but we are going to create. It can stay like that. So let's see how to create tables using Prisma. I'm going to close here and connect to database. Okay, we are going to take care of this later. And this is how we are creating our database tables. We will say model, the table name, and inside we will write our fields. ID, title, description, or whatever it might be. And here is going to be their types, can be integer, string, boolean, or any other table type. And finally, if there is any specific requirements, we are going to write them here. For example, if we say ID, it's going to assign this as a unique primary key. And by default, it's going to use auto increment, That means when we create a post, we don't have to specify any ID. It's gonna increase automatically. Or if you say default now, it's gonna get the current date. You can give here any limit. You can say it will be unique or required. When we create, you are gonna understand better. So let's come back and create our first table. I'm gonna close this menu. Let's also close here. And I will say model. And the first one will be admin. I'm gonna create an ID string and I will say ID. And also we are gonna have the username, which is string, and it's gonna be unique because we are gonna be using this username when we log in. And after that, let's create student. Actually, I'm gonna create all my models here. I'll say teacher, parent, grade, class, subject, lesson, exam, assignment, result, and attendance. Let's see if we have something else. Okay, I forgot events and announcements. Let's create them. Okay, I can delete them. And let's create our fields. Again, we are gonna have the ID and username. Let's copy this. Additionally, I'm gonna add here the student name, which is a string, surname, email, but it's not gonna be required, so I'm gonna put here a question mark. And it's gonna be the same. I will add address. It's gonna be required. Let's create image. Again, not required. We can add this later. We'll have the blood type, string, and I'm gonna add the user sex. But we are gonna have only two options, male or female. So instead of writing here string, let's create enum. And I will say it's gonna be male or female. Let's use this here. Okay. By the way. Okay. Let's comment them out for now to prevent any error. What else we are gonna need? We are gonna need the created at date. Its type will be a date time, and by default we are gonna get the current date. So I will say now. And finally we can write our relationships. The first one will be parent. Let's create our parent here. I'll say ID username. Actually we are gonna need all of them. And created at time. We don't need these. And remember, each student has a parent, but a parent can have multiple students. So I will say students, and it's gonna be student array. So we'll be able to add here multiple students. In this case, we are gonna pass here the parent, and its type will be parent. But we have to add here our relationship. It's gonna check the fields, find the parent ID, and this ID will be exactly the same ID in the parent model. So I will say references, and here is gonna be ID. Let's create this parent ID here. It's gonna be string, and that's all. This is how we are creating relationships. What about teacher? I'm gonna open. We are gonna need all of them. I will just copy and paste. And inside, remember, we can have multiple subjects. is going to be subject array. Let's open here and let's say ID. For users, I'm going to be using ID string, but for the others, I'm going to be using integer because we are going to need this string after the authentication. But for the other items, we don't need that. I'll say ID, and by default, it's going to be auto increment. Let's write the subject name, like history, math, or whatever it might be, and it's going to be unique. And as I said, each subject can have multiple teachers. So I will say teachers, teacher array. And as you can see, there is no error anymore. And also each subject has different lessons. Let's create. Again, ID and name, but this time it doesn't have to be unique. And if you remember our application, let's open the student page. We have the lesson schedule here. We are going to have 5 days from Monday to Friday. And also each lesson has the starting time and the ending time. So let's say day, but again, I'm going to create my options here. Let's say day, and it's going to be Monday to Friday. Okay, let's use it here. And they are going to have the start time. It's going to be date time and end time. Let's write our relationships. I will say subject ID. And let's say subject, the subject model, and I'm going to write my relation. We are going to check the fields, find the subject ID, and it's going to be exactly the same ID in the subject model. Just like that. And also they are going to have the class ID. Let's open this. I'm going to give the name and ID. Actually, it's going to be unique. And I'm going to add the capacity. It's going to be integer. And let's write the relations. I'll say lessons, lesson array. And here, let's do exactly the same thing for the class. So I'll say class ID. Class will be class table, and the field will be class ID. And also each lesson has a teacher, because remember, in the subject we are going to have multiple teachers, but for the lesson we are going to have different teachers. Again, the same thing. Let's select all of them and say teacher, and here is going to be teacher table. Let's add our lessons. Okay. And if you remember, we have the supervisor for each class. Well, let's say supervisor ID is going to be string, and supervisor is going to be a teacher, and I'm going to add my relation. We are going to get this ID and compare this with this ID. In this case, I can use my classes here. And that's all, I think, for the teacher. Let's add the class for the student, because each student belongs to a specific class. So let's say class ID integer, and the class will be class. And let's write relation. You know how to do that. We are going to check this ID and compare this with the class ID. Let's add the student here in the class. Students, student list. Of course, it's a table. And by the way, there is something wrong here. Because I said integer, it's going to be string. Remember, for the users, we are using string. And let's open this grade. Each grade has an ID and level. It depends on the school. In our example, we are going to have grades from 1 to 6. If you want to do it for the high school, you can increase the level. And we are going to have here the students and classes. Let's add them quickly. It's going to be great. Let's copy this and paste for the class here. Okay. What else we are going to need? We are going to need the exam and assignments. Let's give the ID. And they are going to have the title, which is a string. And for the exam, we are going to have the start and end time. And for the assignment, we are going to have the start date and the due date. Because the duration of the exam is just 1 hour or 2, but for assignments, it can be 1 week, 2 weeks, and each exam and assignment has a lesson. Relation, fields, lesson ID, and the lesson ID in the lesson table. Let's do the same thing here and add them inside the lesson. Exams and assignments. And each exam and assignment has a result. Let's copy this and I'll say score. It's going to be integer. And let's add this here and here. Just like that. I'm going to add my relation. And I will do the same thing for the assignment. Okay. What about here? We are going to have a unique ID and the date. And remember, for each lesson, we are going to check the status of the student. So let's say status, and it's going to be Boolean. So if it's true, it's going to be present. If it's not, it's going to be absent. Actually, let's write here present. It will be easier to understand. And I'm going to add here my student and lesson. Remember, this is a user, so I'm going to be using string. And one more. And it's going to be lesson. Let's add this to student and lesson. I will copy this and paste inside the student. And also we are going to have the results. When we get an exam or assignment, we will be able to see the result. And I'm going to add it here. And again, there is a warning because here is going to be string. And here is going to be integer. And let's create event and announcement. Let's copy this. They are going to have the title, string. They are going to have a description. Again, string. Let's remember again. As you can see, this is our event. This is our announcement. They all have the titles, descriptions. For the announcement, we are going to have this date. And for events, we are going to have the starting and ending dates. And there is something important here. We can have general events and announcements, but also specific events and announcement to a class. So when we log in as a student, we are going to see all the general events and also our class events. Let's come back. I will say class ID. I will say relation. Fields will be class ID. And here is going to be ID. But as I said, it can be general also, so I will say not required. Let's add them into class. Events. Okay. And I'm going to add here the start date and end date. And here is going to be only date. Okay, let me check again. By the way, we can remove here admin ID, username, all these fields, teacher. By the way, we can add here unique email and phone for the student. And same thing here. Actually, it's going to be required, so we can call the parent. Grade level. Here is going to be integer. By the way, for the result, I'm going to add here question mark. Because it can belong to an exam or assignment. Events and announcements. Okay, we can save, and if there is something wrong, we can come back and fix it. So right now we can save the changes into our database. To do that, you have many options like creating a local database or using a cloud database provider. But since you have to pay for those providers, or even if they have free options, they are really limited. Let's build our own database using Docker. I'm using Docker because it's easy to use on a local machine, and also it's really easy to deploy applications and databases to virtual servers. I know some of you are hesitating to use Docker because you think it's difficult or has a big learning curve, but that's not true. It's easy, it's consistent, secure. So if you don't have Docker installed on your device, just visit docker.com and download it here. And after that, you are gonna need to create an account. And finally, you are ready to build your first container. Let's come here and search for Postgres. And as you can see, this is the default Postgres image, which has been downloaded over 1 billion times. So we can trust this image. Let's run. I'm gonna open my settings. And let's give a name for this container, Postgres. The port number will be 5432. Since we run Docker on our computer, it's gonna run on localhost and this port number. But when we deploy our application, it's gonna run on the server port. And we are gonna add here our variables. Firstly, I'm gonna add the database user, Postgres underscore user. Let's say llamadev. Here is gonna be password. Let's write anything. And one more. And it's gonna be the database name. And let's say school. I'm gonna run, but before I'm gonna check again. Postgres user, password, and DB. Okay, let's run. And as you can see, it's running on this port number. Right now we can use our connection string. Remember, it's inside the env file. So I'm gonna come here and say the username, which is llamadev, llama from 1 to 6. Here is gonna be localhost. And let's say the database name, which is school. I'm gonna save. And let's see how to save our changes into this database. I'm gonna open up the Prisma documentation. And as you can see, to map your data to database schema, you need to run Prisma migrate. And you can give it a name here. So whenever you make any changes, you can see your migration. I'm gonna copy this, open my terminal, and paste here. And that's all. Let's open our menu. And inside the Prisma folder, it created another folder. And inside, there is an SQL file. And as you can see, it created all our tables, their relationships. So when you don't use a schema like Prisma, you have to write all this code from scratch. But thanks to Prisma, we don't have to. And also it has an awesome interface that we can see our tables. I'll say npx Prisma Studio. Let's visit this localhost page. And as you can see, all these tables are here. So whenever we add an item inside our models, we are gonna see them here. And also we can add a new item here. Just like that. Right now we have one item inside the admin table. And also you can come here and delete. So we can see all the changes here. It's gonna be really useful. And right now let me show you how to fetch data using Prisma. To do that, you can come here and create some data for each table, but it's gonna take really long. To prevent this, you can use my seed file. Let me copy and paste inside Prisma. And as you can see, when we run this main function, it's gonna create 2 admins, 6 grades, 6 classes. There's an error here because we don't have the Prisma client. We are gonna create, don't worry about that. As you can see, we are gonna have some example subjects, teachers, and other items. But how we are gonna run this file? Let's come back and search for seed. And as you can see, we can run it manually by writing prisma-db seed. And if we say prisma migrate reset, it's gonna reset our database, and after it's gonna run our seed. This is the example. But there is something important here. Inside the package.json, we have to add this part. And also we are gonna need this dependency. Let's open package.json. Add this somewhere here. And also, we already have TypeScript and types not. I'm just gonna copy this. Let's terminate this studio for now. And I will say npm install development and ts not. And after that, when using Next.js, we should add it just like that. So let's change it. Okay. Of course, there is a problem because I tried to edit this page after installing this dependency. Let's add it again. And after that, I'm gonna use this command, but before, let's come back and let's see how to create Prisma client. We are gonna need this library. Basically, when we make any request like fetching data, adding new item, updating or deleting, we are gonna be using Prisma client, the model name, and here is gonna be create, delete, update, find, or whatever it might be. And inside we are gonna add the data or the requirements. Let's create this, and after you are gonna understand better. I'm gonna install this dependency. And after that, we are gonna initialize this Prisma client, and using this Prisma, we'll be able to make the CRUD operations. I'm gonna add it here. And inside the source folder, remember we have the library. And inside, let's say prisma.ts, and I will say export const prisma new Prisma client. But if you do that, whenever you call Prisma, it's going to generate a new Prisma client in the development mode. To prevent this, we are going to change our file. As you can see, in development, it initializes Prisma client for each hot reloading. To prevent this, we are going to create only one Prisma client and save it to global this. And if we want to connect again, we are going to check if the Prisma client already exists or not. If we already have, we are going to use it. If we don't have, we are going to create a new one. But again, this is only for the development. For the production, we are not going to have any problem. So let's change here. We set export default Prisma, so we can use it anywhere we want. So let's use the seed. I'll say npx prisma db seed. By the way, there is something wrong. Okay. Okay, we don't have here the supervisor ID. Let's check our schema. And as you can see, supervisor is required. If I make this question mark and reset my database, npx prisma migrate reset. I'll say yes. And seed command has been executed. If you have any problem here, you can delete this .next folder and reset your application, because Next.js caching system is a big problem, as you know. Time to time you have to delete this folder, and if you don't have any problem, you are gonna see this text. And after, let's open up the studio, Prisma Studio, I'm gonna refresh, and all our items are here. As you can see, we have 50 students. Each has different parents and lessons, subjects, and teachers. They all are here. So right now, let's see how to fetch data using Prisma. And after learning how to fetch data, we can reset our database and create our own data using the forms. Okay. Let's start with these teachers. I'm gonna come here, close everything, and here. And I will open my teachers page. It's inside list, teachers, and page. And if you remember, we created here a teacher type, but since we have the teacher table in the schema, we don't need this anymore. Instead, we are going to take our types using this schema. Let's move this here. I'm going to make this smaller. Okay, teacher model is here. I'm going to scroll down and change this type. As you can see, it comes from Prisma client. Let me show you, it's here. But there's a problem here. Firstly, let me fix this small problem. It's gonna be image. And if it doesn't exist, I'll say use noavatar.png. Let me check, by the way, if we have or not. Okay, we didn't use this in the previous tutorial. Let me just copy and paste. Again, you can find it in the GitHub repository. If you remember, our image is not required. So if we don't have any image, we are going to be using this PNG file. Let me close this menu. And here is going to be username. Okay, there is no problem with phone or address. But as you can see, subjects doesn't exist in teacher because the subject is another table. This line just represents the relationship between teacher and subject. It doesn't mean that we have a subject array in the teacher table. This is just a relation. So when we use the type teacher, it's going to take only those items. If you want to add additional informations, you have to add it here, like take the teacher and also add subjects, and its type will be subject array. As you can see, we don't have any problem anymore, and I can do the same thing for the classes. But instead of writing them here, let's create our type. I'll say teacher list is going to be teacher type and also subjects and also classes. And again, I'm going to import this from Prisma client. Let's use it right now. And we don't have any problem anymore. I'm going to save. And we can also move this render row to outside of our component. Just like that. So it's going to be much clearer. And right now we can fetch our data. I'll say const teachers. We are going to be using Prisma. That comes from our library. And I'll say the teacher table. And we can find all the teachers we have. There are many options here. You can find the first item. You can find a specific teacher. Or here, if you say find many, it's gonna fetch multiple teachers. Of course, we are fetching data. It should be await. In this case, our server component should be async function. And let's see what we have inside. I'll say console log and teachers. Of course, it's going to be multiple, so let's say teachers. Let's open our terminal. I'll refresh the page, and as you can see, all teachers are here. So we can change our data. If you remember, we were using here this temporary data. Right now, we are going to be using teachers. Let's actually say data, and I'm going to pass this here. Right now, we are going to have a problem, as you can see, because inside subjects and classes, because as I said, the teacher table includes only these fields. These are the relationships. If you want to add the related tables, you can come here and write your condition. I'll say include subjects will be true and classes will be true. Let's open our terminal again. I will scroll down. Right now we have the subjects and classes, but in our table, we want to show their names here. Let's remember what's inside the subjects. As you can see, there is a name, we can use it. And also inside class, again, there is a name. So let's use them here. So I will say teacher subjects.map. And for each item inside, we are going to return the subject name. Actually, let's say subject. And after returning names, finally, I can separate them using join. So I can do the same thing for the classes. Map for each class, return the class name, and join. Of course, this name is reserved, so we shouldn't use class. Let's say class item. Okay, let's see right now. And perfect. As you can see, teacher name, email, teacher ID, which is username, their subjects, and some of them don't have classes, but it doesn't mean they don't have any lessons. Remember, it just represents the classes that the teacher is a supervisor. But since we have 6 classes and they already have supervisors, they are going to be empty. So this is how we are fetching data. So what about the pagination? Let's say we want to see here only 10 items. In this case, we are going to see only first 10 items here, and those items will be on the second page. If you remember, we have the pagination component. Let me close here and here. And right now, using this component, we are going to show here the page number. We will be able to change the page, but to do that, we are going to need the current page number. By default, it's going to be 1. If we have more items, when I click here, the page number will be 2. And to store this number, you don't need to use statehook or any state management tool. You can directly store it in the URL. So in this case, the page will be 1. And when I click here, it's going to be 2. And using this page ID, we are going to fetch different items. Firstly, I'm going to take first 10 items. So I can come here and say, take only 10 items. As you can see, there are 10 items right now. But if I make it page 2, we are going to fetch the second 10 items. But how we are going to reach to this number? It's really easy. If you are using Next.js, you can directly get your search params. Let's write the type. It's going to be an object that includes the key and the value, which is a string again, but it's not required. It can be also undefined. Let's see what's inside. I'll say console log. And let's comment this out, open our terminal, and as you can see, our search param is here. So whatever you add here will be visible on these params. Let's try. I will also say, for example, teacher ID. Let's say 1. You can say phone, for example. If I enter, you are going to see that all these items are here. So let's destructure this page. I'll say page and the other params. That comes from search params. Of course, const. Of course, our object should end here. Okay. Right now, if we don't have any page number here, by default, it's gonna be 1. So let's say const p. If page exists, take it. If it doesn't exist, it's gonna be 1. And right now, using this number, we can fetch the other page's items. To do that, we are gonna be using skip method. And right here, how many items we want to see. It was 10 multiplied by page number minus 1. And there is a problem here that because the type of the page is string, but here it should be number. So I will say if page exists, transform this into an integer. If it doesn't exist, use 1. Okay, so at the beginning, the page number will be 1. 1 minus 1 is going to be 0. 0 multiplied by any number, doesn't matter, it's going to be 0. So we are not going to skip any item at the beginning. We are going to take the first 10 items. But if the page number is 2, 2 minus 1 will be 1, multiplied by 10 equals 10. That means we are going to skip the first 10 items and we are going to take the other 10. And if the number is 3, here is going to be 2, multiplied by 10 is going to be 20. So it's going to skip the first 20 items. That means the first 2 pages, and it's going to show the next 10 items. This is how it works. But if you want to, instead of writing this number again and again for each list page here, let's import this from our library folder. I'm going to create a new file, settings or whatever you want. And I will say export const item per page. And it's going to be 10. Let's import this. Okay, it's not coming. Let's import this here. Library folder and settings. Okay, it's still the same. Let's make this 5. Okay, it works. So right now we can use our pagination component, but to decide how many pages we have, we are going to need the total number of the teachers. So if we have 10 teachers, we are going to have here 2 pages. Let's get the number of the teachers. It's really easy. I'm going to close here. And I'll say const count await prisma dot teacher and count. Let's console log. I'm gonna save, open my console, and as you can see, 15 items. You can also fetch them in a single function. Let me show you how to do that. So instead of this data, we are gonna return data and also count await, and we are gonna be using Prisma transaction method. And inside this method, we can call multiple requests. The first one will be find many, and the second one will be this count. I'm gonna delete here, and since we are using await here, we don't need to write them here, and that's all. Right now we have the data and the count. So let's pass this count and this page number to pagination component. I'll say page is going to be p and the count will be count. Let's open our component and define our type. We are going to have the page and the count. They are going to be number. Right now I can delete all these buttons. I'm going to leave only one. And I'm going to calculate the total page number. And for each page, I'm going to create this button here. To do that, we can use the array function. Array from, basically we are going to create an array here. And we are going to map that array. And for each item, we are going to return this button. Firstly, we are going to add here the length of the array. Let's calculate the page number. Count divided by item per page. I'm going to import 15 items. Item per page is 5. We are going to see 3 items. But if we have 16 items, for example, here is going to be more than 3. In this case, it's going to be 4. This is why we are using this math function. And we are going to get the each item. It's not important, so I'm going to be using underscore. But we are going to need the index number. And since it starts from 0, but the minimum page should be 1, let's say const page index is going to be index plus 1. And after that, I'm going to return my button. Just like that. And if you are using map, you need here a unique key. And it's going to be the index number. Or page index. And I'm going to also use this here. We have 3 pages, but all of them are active. So let's write here a condition. I'm going to wrap my class name. Just like that. So we can use JavaScript inside. And I'll say if the page equals page index, it's going to be llama sky. If it's not, it's going to be empty. And right now, only the current page is 1. But how we are going to change the page number? When I click here, we are going to decrease. When I click here, we are going to increase the number. And when I click any of these numbers, we are going to directly pass this number to the URL params. To do that, we are going to be using useRudder hook. Const rudder useRudder hook that comes from navigation. And since we are using here a hook, our component should be a client component. And also we are going to be using here click events. So we have to use a client component. And right now I'm going to create here a function const change page. We are going to get the new page. It's going to be a number. So we are going to pass this number to our search params. But before, I'm going to fetch the existing params. Const params new URL search params. And we are going to pass here window location dot search. So it's going to return all the existing params. Like again, page 2, teacher 1, this phone number. We are using this because when we change the page, we are going to keep the other items. We are going to change only this number. So I will say set. The page params will be new page, but it should be a string because we are taking here a number, but we are using it in our URL string. So we have to transform this. And after that, we are going to push the new params. So I will say router.push, but we are not going to change the page. We are going to take the existing one. So I'm going to be using window.location.pathname. And we are going to pass here our new params. Just like that. Let's try. I'm going to use this function here. When we click on this button, we are going to call this function and we are going to pass this page index. And right now, when I click here, as you can see, page is 3. But even if we have here different items, when I click, as you can see, it just changes the page. This is what we want. So we can do the same thing for other buttons. I'm gonna copy this, paste here. When we click on this button, we are gonna decrease the page number. And when we click on this next button, it's gonna be +1. Just like that. But there's a problem here. If I click one more, it's going to page 4. Or if I click here 5 times, it's gonna be -1. To prevent this, we should use this disable attribute. So let's come back. And I will say const has previous item per page multiply by page -1, and if it's bigger than 0. Let me write the second one, and after I'm gonna explain. Const has next item per page, again page -1 plus item per page, and it should be smaller than the count. So let's say we are on the page 1. Here is going to be 0. 0 multiplied by item per page. Here is going to be 0. And this is not bigger than 0. In this case, this button will be disabled. So I can write here my condition if we don't have previous. If we are on the page 2, here is going to be 1 multiplied by 5 is going to be 5. And it's bigger than 0. So we can turn back. And what about here? If the number is 1, here is going to be 0. And we are adding this item per page, because if the existing items plus 5 more items smaller than the total number, that means we have more page to see. But if we are on the page 3, here is going to be 2 multiplied by 5 is going to be 10. 10 plus 5, 15. But the total number is already 15. That means we cannot see the next page. This is how it works. So again, I'll say disabled. And if we don't have the next page, let's come back. As you can see, this is disabled. When I click here, it's going to be page 2, 3, and right now this is disabled, and we can turn back. Okay, this is what we want. But what about other search query? Let's open up the student page. Okay, here it should be student. Let's fix that quickly. I'm going to open students page. And when we click on this button, we are going to open up the students and the student number. Okay, anyway, if you remember, we have here some shortcuts, and when I click on this link, it's gonna open up the teachers page, but we should see the teachers only belong to this student. Let's remember our schema again. I'll scroll up, and each student has lessons, and each lesson has a class, and each class has students. By the way, here should be students. It's an array. Let's reset our database. npx prisma db push force reset. I'm gonna use my seed again. Let's open the studio. And inside class, okay, we have the students. So basically, if I pass here the class ID of this student and find all the lessons of that class, I can reach the all teachers of that student. Let me show you and you are going to understand better. So when I click on this button, I'm gonna update my params. Let's open up the single student page. And find our link here. So I'll say, when you click here, open up the list page, teachers, and the class ID will be the student's class ID. But we don't have yet. For now, let's say 2. Just like that. And right now, using this query, I can find a specific group of teachers. To do that, we are going to be using where condition. Inside our request, I'll say where. And you can use here any teacher field. For example, if I say teacher ID equals 1, of course, it's going to be a string. Let's choose here any teacher, for example, teacher 12. Let's see. Only this teacher is here. So you can write here any condition you want. I'm going to open up my schema again. It's going to be easier to understand. So I'm going to find all the lessons of this teacher and all the classes of those lessons, and the class ID should be this class ID. Let's say lessons, and I will say some class ID, and it should be this class ID. And it's going to come from query params dot class ID. Of course, it should be integer. Of course, it can be undefined. For now, I'll say we are sure that it exists. I'm gonna enter. And that means all these teachers have lesson in this class. Of course, we can update here also. Just like that. As you can see, only 5 items. If I say class number, any non-existing number, we are not going to have any teacher. This is how it works. But of course, we can have different queries here. So instead of writing them like that, you might think that just pass here query params. But it's not a good idea because to protect requests, we need some rules. We cannot accept any given query params. And also, in our application, we have different roles. If we are the admin, we will be able to see all the exams. We can write any query we want. But if we are the teacher or student, we are supposed to see only our exams, not other students or other teachers. And also, when we implement this search component, when we write any text and enter, we are going to update our URL and it's going to be search and the text. But using this search query, we are going to search for different fields. For example, for the exams page, we are going to search for subject name. If we are on the teachers page, we are going to search for the teacher name, the class name, and also we can search for the teacher name. So basically, we are going to need different roles for each list item here. So instead of directly passing our query params, let's write our rules. So I will say URL params conditions. And after, we are going to also add the role conditions. But for now, I will say if query params exists. For each item inside these params, we are going to create different where condition. So let's say for each item, and since it's an object, we can use object entries. Let's say const key value of object entries. And we are going to pass here query params. And it's going to return us all the items inside the params. And we can use here the if block or switch case. I prefer using switch case because we have certain rules. It cannot be something else. I'll say key. And if the key is class ID, we are gonna return our where condition. Remember, it was lessons, sum, class ID, parse integer, and the value. And of course, it can be undefined. To prevent this, at the beginning, let's write here an if block. I'll say value shouldn't be undefined. And to use this expression inside the where condition, we should assign this to somewhere. Let's say const query. At the beginning, it's going to be an empty object. And we can change its lessons field. And to prevent any possible mistake, we can write here our type, and it's going to come from Prisma, our table name, and its where condition fields. Let me show you. I'm going to import Prisma, that comes from Prisma client. And if I say teacher where input, we'll be able to use all these fields in the where condition. And it's awesome because we cannot make any mistake here. If I say something unexisting, it's going to give me an error. And also, it's going to be much easier to write our conditions because if I say query dot, we can see all our options here. This is why we are using Prisma. Everything is much easier. Let's take this back. And let's use this query here. And here. Let's come back and write our condition, class ID 2, and perfect. Class ID 3, different teachers. But if I say 10, for example, it's going to be empty because we don't have a class number 10. Okay, so this is how we are writing where conditions and how we are protecting our query params. Because if we pass here directly query params without any filtering here, we can reach any data that should be private, like wage or whatever it might be. So this is why we are using this structure. And let's do the same thing for the search component. When I write anything here and enter, we are going to update our search params. We are going to do exactly the same thing. Remember how we are changing this page number. So I'm going to copy here, open my search component, table search. Here is going to be use client because we are going to be using a hook and click events. I will quickly import my router. Use router hook. And here is going to be a form. And when we enter, it's going to run this on submit function. Let's say handle submit. Let's create it here. I'm going to paste my previous items. And this time we are going to update the search params. And its value will be whatever we write inside this input. To do that, we can use event, React form event, and it's going to be HTML form element. You don't have to memorize this, just hover over, and as you can see, HTML form element. Let's take this value. Firstly, I will say event prevent default, because when we submit, by default, it's gonna refresh the page. To prevent this, we are using this function. So I will say const value, event, current target, the first item, and its value. To prevent this type error, let's say as HTML input element, and I'm gonna pass this here. Let's try. I'll say test. I will enter. Nothing has changed because I didn't save. Let's try again. And perfect. Okay, right now using this value, we can search for, let's say, the teacher name. Let's remember again, we have the teacher name. Let's open up the teachers page. And I'm gonna add here another case. Let's say break and create different case. And here is gonna be search. Query.name, as you can see, it's here. And this name will contain whatever we write here. So it doesn't have to start with this word. Even if I write ME, it's gonna fetch this item. To do that, we are gonna be using the contains method. We are gonna pass here the value, and also I will say insensitive. So you can use also capital letters. Let's say me. As you can see, all these teachers are here because they all have me. If I say me1, this is how it works. It's really easy. You can also search for different fields, for example, teacher name or the subject name, but we don't need this for this page. I'm gonna explain this for the other pages, don't worry. So right now, let's do the same thing for the other pages. I'm gonna open my student page. It's here. I can move this render row to outside of my component. Here is gonna be async. And let's fetch all the students we have. I'm gonna close here. And again, I'm gonna get the search params. Let's copy everything here. And paste. We are gonna have the page query params. Here is gonna be Prisma, student var input, and when we search for anything, we are gonna check the student name, so it can stay like that, but we can change here. In the teachers page, and the single teacher, so when I click here, it's gonna open up the students list, and we are gonna pass the teacher ID as a param, and to fetch all students of that teacher, again, we can use the class, because inside the class, we have lessons, and for each lesson, we have the teacher ID. So let's say teacher ID. We are gonna check the student class, its lessons, and it's gonna include the teacher ID, and it's gonna be value. Remember, it's a string, so we can use it like that. And finally, I'm gonna import my Prisma that comes from library Prisma. We are gonna fetch all the students, and which table we are gonna need. As you can see, there is a class name here. In this case, we need to add the user class. It's gonna be true. Here, and I'm gonna import item per page and student. Okay, let's use this data here and pass our page number and the count number. Page will be P, count will be count. We need to change our type. We don't need this anymore. Let's say student list. We are going to get the student table type, and also we are going to add the user class. Let's use it. Just like that. Let's open this row and see if there's a mistake. It's going to be image. We don't have student ID. It's going to be username. That is going to be student ID. And also we can use the grade table for this column. But since we are using the class name and the first item of this class name includes the grade, we don't need that. we don't need to fetch extra table. So I will say class.name and take the first item. And here is going to be name. And of course, if there is no image, we are going to be using noavatar.png. And there is something wrong with this form model, because as you can see, we are using number, let's say number or string, because users are string and the others are integer. So we don't have any problem anymore. Let's see. Okay, we have 50 items. We can see the other students. We can also use our page buttons. Let's search for any item. And perfect. Let's take care of our teacher link. When we click here, we are going to add the teacher ID. So I'm going to open up the single teacher page here. And when we click on this link, I'll say list students. I'm going to close this menu. And we are going to pass here teacher ID. And here is going to be dynamic, but for now, let's say teacher2. Just like that. Let's write here something else. And this teacher doesn't exist. Okay. So what about parents? Let's do the same thing quickly here. When we search for any text, we are going to check the parent name. Let's copy here again. Open parents page. We are going to change here. Let's move this row to outside of the component. And here, I'm going to paste my code. Let's import Prisma. Here is going to be parent var input. We are going to search the parent name. And we don't need anything else here. And I'll say break. By the way, after each case, you should use break. And also we can use the default. So if we have some other params instead of teacher ID or search, it's not going to do anything. Let's do the same thing here. I'm going to save. And let's see what types we are going to need. As you can see, we are going to need the student names. That means we are going to use the student table. So I will say parent list, the parent table type, and also students, and it's going to be the student type. And of course, it's going to be an array because a single parent can have multiple children. I'm going to copy this, paste here. And of course, we are going to be using student names. So let's say map for each student, return the student name and separate them using join. And let's import Prisma. Here is going to be Prisma parents. Students will be included. And let's import item per page. Let's pass our data. And here is going to be page and count. And perfect. Let's search for any name. Okay, it doesn't exist because there's a space here. Okay, right now we have 3 pages. If I say 11, this is what we want. And the next list is subjects. Let's copy here. We are gonna do exactly the same thing. Subjects page. We are gonna change the type, but before, let's move this render. And right here are functions. Here is gonna be Prisma subject var input. When we search, we are gonna check the subject name. Let's import this. Subject table. And which related table we are gonna need? As you can see, we are gonna need teachers. Inside the subjects, we have the teachers. So let's say teachers, and let's import this. Pass our data, and after that we are going to change our type. So I will say subject list is going to be the subject type, and also add the teachers, and here is going to be teacher array. And again, we are going to be using teacher names. Map for each teacher. Return teacher name and separate them. It's that easy. Let's see. Okay, we have all our items here. Actually, we are sure that our pagination works. Let's make this 10 again. And if I search for any item, we are going to see those subjects. And our teacher names are here. Okay, what about classes? Again, we are going to search for the name, but also in the single teacher page, as you can see, we have the teacher classes. So when I click here, again, I'm going to add the teacher ID. And using that teacher ID, we can fetch our classes. Actually, let's say supervisor ID. I will open the single teacher page. And I'm going to change here, list, classes, supervisor ID. Again, let's say teacher 2. After fetching this single teacher, we are going to change this data. Where is classes? Let's move our rows. And I'm going to paste my search params and data fetching functions. Let's copy this. Here is going to be class var input. I'm not going to change here, but I'm going to add one more, and it's going to be supervisor ID. And the query supervisor ID will be this value. Let's import this. Here is going to be class, and which table we are going to include. Okay, this is the teachers. We are going to include the teacher name, so we will need the teacher table. And again, instead of adding the grade table, we can use this first letter. Supervisor. I'll import item per page. Let's pass our data. And page. And I'm going to change my type. Class list. The class type, and also supervisor, and it's going to be teacher. Here is going to be name and the first item, and here is going to be supervisor name. Let's change our type, class list. If you want to, you can add here also the surname. Let's give a space here, name and surname. Just like that. Let's click on our teacher link. Teachers classes. As you can see, it doesn't exist. Let's come back and let's choose one of them. Let's say 12. And perfect. And what about lessons? Again, in the teacher page, we can fetch all the lessons of the teacher. So we are going to pass here the teacher ID. Classes, students, here. List page, lessons, and the teacher ID will be any teacher ID. Again, let's say 2. I'm gonna do exactly the same thing. If you want to, you can create a common function for all these items, but it's gonna make it more complicated and it will be hard to understand. That's why I'm doing this again and again, because as I said, we are gonna need different rules and requirements. So let's open up the lessons page. Move our row here, paste our function, import them. Here is going to be lesson. And let's see which table we should include. As you can see, we need the subject name, the class name, and the teacher name. So we are going to need 3 tables. The first one will be subject, class, and teacher. I'm gonna import this. By the way, when we include all these items, it's gonna fetch all the fields of the subject, class, and teacher, but we don't need all this information. We are just gonna need the teacher name, the class name, and the subject name. Maybe we can also add here the teacher surname. So to increase the speed, instead of fetching every single thing, we can use select, and I'm gonna write the field name. Again, we are gonna need the class name, and here we are gonna need the teacher name and also teacher surname. So we are not gonna fetch unnecessary data. Let's pass this here. And let's change the type. Lesson list is going to be the lesson table type, and also we'll need the subject. We'll need the class. And we'll need the teacher. Okay, let's use it. Here, and here is going to be subject.name, class.name, and teacher.name, and also the surname. Okay, perfect. And when we click on this link, it should fetch the lessons belong to that teacher. Let's come back. I'm gonna import this. And here is gonna be teacher ID. And of course, let's change the type. Lesson where input. And perfect. Okay. And I can do the same thing for the student link, because here, as you can see, we have the student lessons. So what we can do here, we can pass the class ID, the students class, and using that class, we can fetch all the lessons belong to that class. Let's do that. I will open my single student page and change here. Class ID. And again, let's say 2. Let's take this. As you can see, there's an error because here should be a number. So I'm going to be using parse integer and pass my value here. Let's click students lessons and perfect. It's exactly the same class. And what about this search input? This time, let's try to search 2 different things, the subject name and also the teacher name. To do that, I'm going to change here. Let's copy this. But this time, we are going to be using query.or because we are going to have 2 different conditions. The first one will be subject, its name, and it should contain this value, and also teacher, and again, name contains this value. I'm gonna save. Let's remove this class ID so we can see all the lessons. Let's write here some lesson name, just like that. And also we can search for any teacher. Let's say name 1. So it's gonna fetch this one and this one. And of course the other items that include me1. Okay, what about exams? Let's quickly paste our code. I'll open up exams, move my row here, and paste my code. Let's import Prisma. Here is going to be exam. What else we are going to need? As you can see, we have 3 different tables, subject, class, and teacher. But if you check the exam table, you are going to see that we have only lesson. So firstly, I'm going to fetch the lesson. And inside the lesson, we can fetch the subject, the teacher, and the class. So I will say include lesson. And we are just going to need subject, teacher, and class. So let's select them. We don't need anything else. I'll say subject. And in this table, we are just going to need this name, nothing else. So again, I'll say select. Name will be true. And for the others, teacher, I'll say name and surname. And here is going to be class. Let's import this and change our type. Exam list, the exam type, and also inside we are going to have the lesson, and inside we will have the subject, class, and teacher. Okay, let's use it. Of course, those items are inside the lesson. Lesson subject.name, item lesson.class.name, teacher, and also surname. And we are going to need here the date, but we cannot directly use it as string. We have to transform this, And I want to see the day, the month, and the year. To do that, I'm going to be using date time format. You can pass here any location, let's say US, format, and here we are going to pass item.start time. Let's pass our data. I'm going to import this Prisma. Here is going to be examware input. We are going to change here, but before, when we search any item, we are going to check the subject names. Lesson. So I will say subject, its name, and it's going to contain our value. And the mode will be insensitive. And what about here? Let's see the teacher page. We can fetch the teacher's exams and also the student's exams. So again, we can pass our class ID and the teacher ID. So query.lesson.class ID. Of course, it's going to give an error because here can be undefined. To prevent this, you can move it into an object, just like that. And here, again, lesson, and the teacher ID will be this value. Let's try. This is the single student page. Let's copy this, paste here. Here is going to be exams. Actually, we can do the same thing for others. Let's don't waste time. Here is going to be assignments and results. And for the single teacher page, here, we are going to pass the teacher ID. So let's copy this. Paste for the others. Here is going to be exams and assignments. Okay. Let's close them and pass our data. Okay, let's search for something. It works. If I open up the single teacher page and click here, it doesn't have any exam. Let's say 3. As you can see, this is what we want. And same thing for the student. And perfect. After the exams, let's check the assignments. It's pretty much the same. Instead of this start date, we are going to be using due date. Let's come back. Copy here. Open assignments. Move this row and paste it here. Let's import them. Here is going to be assignments. I'm going to quickly pass my data. And again, we are going to need exactly the same thing. But I'm going to change here. Assignment type, subject type, class, and teacher. Let's move this here. And again, let's say lesson, the item and the name. And also I'm going to add here the surname. Just like that. And let's use this date. But this time it's going to be due date. And what about our conditions? Here is going to be assignment where type. They are going to be exactly the same. If you want to, you can add here also the teacher name, but it can stay like that. You know how to do that. You are just going to add here or, and here is going to be teacher name. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to search for bio. Perfect. Teacher ID. Let's change this. Okay. And the student. Okay, it was easy. What about results? Let's copy this. Results page. Move our render row. Paste our code. Import our Prisma client. Item per page. And let's see what we are going to have. We have the subject, student, and teacher. Let's see our table. As you can see, we can directly add the student. But for the teacher and also for this class, we are going to need the exam or assignment. Because remember, the result can belong to an exam or assignment. And inside them, we have the lesson. And inside the lesson, we have the teacher and the class. So let's fetch them. By the way, here is going to be title, not subject name. Let's change here. So it's going to be exam or assignment title. Of course, we are going to change our type. But before, I want to import this Prisma. Change here. Pass my data. Since we have two different types here, exam or assignment, we should do the same thing for each of them. Let's remove here. Firstly, I'm going to fetch my student. But we are just going to need its name and surname. So I will say select. Name will be true. Surname will be true. And after that, I will say exam. And it's going to include the lesson. And inside the lesson, we are going to get the class and teacher. And again, only their names. Of course, here is going to be select. And teacher. I'm going to also fetch the surname. And I'll do exactly the same thing for the assignment. If it's exam, here is going to be empty. If it's assignment, here is going to be empty. And right now, instead of data, I'll say data response. And I'm going to define my data here. Const data, data response. And for each item inside, we are going to take the exam type. It's going to be exam or assignment. Let's say assessment actually. is going to be either the exam or assignment. Okay, there is something wrong here. Let's comment this out for now. And as you can see, there is no problem. And I will say const is exam. And how we can know that it's an exam? As you can see, we have the start time here, but in this case, it's start date. So if I say start time in assessment, that means this result belongs to an exam. By the way, to prevent this type error, I will write my condition here. If it doesn't exist, we are just going to return null. And after that, I will say return. ID will be item.id. Title. We are going to need the student name. And surname. And the same thing for the teacher. But of course, here is going to be assessment.lesson. And what else? We are going to need the score. We are going to need the class name. Lesson.class.name. And let's say start time. And if it's exam, here's gonna be start time. If not, it's gonna be start date. Okay. I hope you understood why we are doing this. That because we have two different options. If you don't create here a common data, you have to write different conditions for each item here, like if item and assignment exists, take the item, assignment, and start date. If it's exam, take the item, exam, and start time. So it's going to be more complex. To prevent this, we are using this data response and passing those items to our data. Did I pass them here? Okay. And right now, we can change our type. I'll say result list. In this case, instead of calling the result type, I have to write my own. Actually, let's copy them. Here is going to be string. Again, by the way, here is going to be semicolon, not comma. It's a type. Teacher name, surname. Score will be number. Class name will be a string. And the start time will be a date. Okay, let's use it here. And right now I can say item.student name, teacher name, and surname. I can do the same thing here. Here is going to be class name. And for the date, again, we are going to be using our date function here. And here is going to be item.start time. And finally, I'm going to change here Prisma result where input. When we write any search input, we can check the exam title or the student name. So let's say query or, and inside this array, I'm going to write my options. The first one will be exam, and we are going to check its title, and it's going to contain our value. And of course, don't forget to write your mode, insensitive, and one more, and this is going to be student and its name. And what about here? We are going to need only one item. By the way, where is default? Let's check the others. Why I didn't add this? I remember I did, but oh, it's here. I just added for students and teachers. But anyway, let's continue. For the single student page, we can see all the student results. As you can see, we are passing class ID, but inside the result, we already have the student ID. We can directly take it. Let's open up the student page here. And for the result, here is going to be student ID. And let's say student 2. I'm not sure if it exists or not. If not, we are going to change it. And let's say student ID query.student ID. And that's all. Let's see. Okay, all the results are here. Let's search for exam 5. Okay, it doesn't work. Because we are not using this query here. Perfect. Let's say 2. Okay. And right now we can take care of the events and announcements. They are going to be similar, so it will be easy. As you can see, we have the event title, and we are going to need this table, class table, and that's all. Only class table. Let's do this. I'm not going to copy from here. Let's copy from here. I will open events, move my row, paste my code, import them quickly. Here is going to be events. We are just going to need the class, and let's pass them here. Data, page, and the count. Let's change the type. Event list is going to be the event type, and also we are going to add our class. Just like that. Let's use it here. And here is going to be class.name. Again, I'm going to change this date. Just like that. It's going to be start time. But for those items, it's going to be like 8 a.m., 9 a.m., or whatever it might be. As you can see, start time and end time. So here is going to be the full date, but here is going to be only hour. To do that, we can use to local time string. And again, location here. And I'll say hour will be 2-digit. Minute will be again 2-digit. And hour 12 will be false. I can do the same thing for the end time. Let's take care of our where input. I'm gonna import Prisma. Event where input. When we search, we are gonna check the title. We don't need anything else. I can delete here. And that's all, I think. Let's see. Okay, I'll say 2. And perfect. As you can see, start time and end time. And this is the full date. Let's do the same thing for the announcements. I will copy here, open my announcements. This is not the list. Here. I'm gonna move my row. Prisma. Announcement. Where input. Again, we are gonna search for the title, but this time we are just gonna need the date. We don't need any hour or minute. Let's import Prisma. Here is gonna be announcement. Includes class. Let's pass our data. And I will change my type, announcement type. And also a class. Of course, for the consistency, let's say announcement list. Here is going to be class name. And again, we are going to be using our time. And what was the name? Okay, just date. Let's search for an item. Okay, it works. And that's all, guys. This is how we are fetching data. But there is one thing important here. If we are not an admin, we shouldn't update or delete this announcement. Only admin can create. Or if we are the student or teacher, we are supposed to see only our exams or results or assignments. And in the previous lesson, we were using this temporary data. As you can see, role is admin. We can make it teacher. This time we are going to see less items. Student. Only exams, result, and other items here. But even if we are the student and there is no teacher list here, I can still see the teachers. Or students or any other list. I can even see here the single teacher, all this information that I'm not supposed to see. So basically, we should protect our routes. To do that, we should be authenticated first. Let me close everything here. And let's see how to handle authentication. I'm going to create here the authentication section. And in our application, there won't be a classic login and register logic because in a school management application, students, teachers, and parents are not supposed to create accounts. Only the admin can create and delete users. So if there's a new teacher, they go to the principal's office and the admin registers and give them the username and password. Or if there's a new student, they come with the parents and again make the registration in the office. So we'll have the user creation process. And of course, the admin can delete the users. And we are going to have the login process. When we create a new user, we will get the user ID. And using forms, we'll enter all the user details like address, phone number, or any other field, and send them to database using server actions. So all the user details will be on our database. So I will say admin and all users. And when a user wants to log in, they are gonna use the login page. But there is something important here. After the login process, we need to get the user role and protect our routes. For example, if the user is a student, they won't be allowed to see the teachers list or any other user's homepage. To do that, we are gonna be using Next.js middleware. It will allow us to intercept page requests. So whenever we want to visit any page, the middleware will check the authentication and the user role, and if they meet all the requirements, it will allow the user to reach that page. So let's create our authentication and create our first user. To do that, we'll be using Clerk. You can find the link in the description. If you click on that link, you'll see this page, and after creating an account, you'll be ready to build authentication. Why are we using Clerk? Because it's really easy to implement authentication. It just takes 5 minutes, and you don't have to worry about the sessions, tokens, cookies, security, or social logins. Clerk does everything for you. And if you have less than 10,000 monthly active users, it's completely free, and for a school management application, it's more than enough because you will probably have a maximum of 1,000 students and parents. Okay, let's open the documentation and see how to implement. I'm gonna choose Next.js. We are gonna need this Clerk library. Let's install. I will open my terminal, npm install Clerk Next.js. And after that, we are going to set our environment variables. Let's copy here. But before doing that, I recommend you open your dashboard and create an application. As you can see, this is our previous application. I will create a new one. Let's say school. And in our application, we are not going to use any social login. We are just going to have the username and the password. Let's create. And our environment variables are here. Let's copy. Open .env file and paste them here. After that, we'll create the middleware and add here our configuration. But as I said, we are going to have different rules. But for now, I will just copy here. And after creating our users and roles, we are going to add here different rules. Let's open the menu. And if you are using the source folder, create your middleware inside. And paste this code. And finally, we should wrap our application with this provider so we can reach the user data in all our pages and components. I will open up my layout and wrap my application just like that. Let's import. That comes from Clerk Next.js. And right now we can create our login page. But for the test purpose, let's create here for users. And after testing, we are going to create our own users using the dashboard. I'll say admin, admin. I'm gonna ignore these rules because the password is too short, but as I said, it's just a test. As you can see, the password is too weak, but it can stay. Let's create the others, or actually, we can just use this one, because later we are gonna be using the user roles. Let's come here. We wrap our application. And right now we can create our sign-in page. As I said, we are not going to have any sign-up page. Only the admin will be able to create users, but we can create the sign-in page. As you can see, it's really easy. I'm just going to copy here and create my page just like that. In the example, it uses this sign-in path, but in our application, we are going to be using the home page. If you remember, in our application, we have an empty home page. Right now, we will create our login component here. So let's come back and create our page. Inside the app directory, let's close everything here. Oh, in the previous lesson, we created this sign-in page. It's empty, but we are not going to be using this. I will delete, and I will delete this page. And inside the app directory, I will say sign in and page tsx. I will say home page. Let's write here test so you can see the difference. And as you can see, it's here. Nothing has changed. Right now, I'm gonna add my sign in component. Our component is here. If I say admin, and write here any random password, you can see the error here. But if I write admin, as you can see, we are authenticated. But by default, after the login process, it's gonna redirect us to the home page. And since we are using our home page as a login page, there will be a conflict here. What we can do, we can redirect users to different pages. As you can see, there is a redirect URL here. So you can use different pages. But if you use this sign-in component, you are going to always see the same design. If you want to create your custom component, you can use Clerk Elements. It's better right now, but I think it will be stable soon. Let's see how to use it. Firstly, we are going to need Clerk Elements. Let's open up the terminal and install our library. And if you are using TypeScript, make sure that the module resolution is bundler. Let's open up. As you can see, it's already bundler. I'm gonna close here and here. And after that, we are ready to create our custom flow. Let's see the examples. This is a really simple one. Firstly, we are going to be using the sign-in component, and we are going to start with root, and after that we will create our first step. In our application, we are going to have only one step. We will just ask username and password, and we will sign in. That's all. So inside the step, we'll have two fields. The first one will be the username, which includes the label and the input, and the second one will be our password. And finally, we are going to create sign-in action, which is our button. And if there is an error, it shows it here using Clerk Global Error. Let's create, and after you are going to understand better. Firstly, I'm going to import my components and make sure that your component is a client component. And I will create my component here using my shortcut. Let's say login page. And after, I'm gonna center everything. Firstly, let's say age screen. I'll say flags, align item center, justify content center, and the background will be Llama Skylight. Let me close this menu. And inside, I'm gonna create my root, signin.root, and inside, I'll create my step. Its name will be start. You can give here any specific style, let's say background white. I'm gonna give some padding, rounded MD. I'll give some shadow, let's say 2x large, and I'm gonna center everything vertically. So let's say flex, flex column, and gap between each item will be 2. So basically, we are gonna have here our container, and inside, let's write our title. I'll say h1 tag and the name of the application. And I'm gonna create h2 tag, and let's say sign into your account. And to see our changes, let's create our other components. Firstly, if there is any error, we are gonna show it here. Clerk global error. And I'm gonna create my first field, clerk.field. And I'm gonna give its name. It's gonna be identifier because it's gonna represent our username. Let's create the label. It's gonna be username. And I'm gonna create the input. And it's gonna be like the regular input. I'm gonna give the type, a text. I'll say required. I'm gonna give the style later. And if there's an error related to username, we are gonna show it here. So I will say clerk.field error. And let's create the other one. Its name will be password, label, and the type will be password. And finally, I will create my action. Signin.action. I'll say sign in. And it's gonna be a submit button. Let's see. Okay, it's not visible because we are already authenticated. We shouldn't see the login page. To prevent this, let's use the clerk's user component here and log out. If you remember, in the dashboard layout, we have the navbar. Let's see what we have inside. We have the user avatar here, but for now, let's comment this out and use user button here. Let's see the admin page. And as you can see, we have the user button. If I click here, I can see my user information and I can sign out. And right now we can see the login page. If I write something different, as you can see, this is the field error. If I write this correct, but the wrong password, you are gonna see this error. And if there is something else, we are gonna see the global error here. Let's give a style. Firstly, for this h1 tag, I want to also add here my logo. So let's say image. The source will be logo.png. I'm gonna give my size, which is 24. And after, the name of the application. Let's give a style. Text will be X large. Font will be bold. Flags, item center, and gap between items will be 2. And what about H2? I'm just gonna change the color. Just like that. Let's take care of our field. Firstly, if there is an error, I'm gonna make this small and red. And for this field, the label and input will be vertical, and gap between them will be 2. And for the label, it's gonna be X small, and the text color will be gray. Let's give a style for the input. I'm gonna give padding. Rounded will be MD. I will give a ring and its color will be gray. Let's do the same thing for the others. Here, field, label, and input. And for field errors, again, text will be XML and the color will be red. And finally, our button is gonna be blue color. Text will be white, margin Y will be 1, rounded, and the text will be small. We can also give padding, but it's gonna be small. Let's say 10 pixels. And perfect. It looks pretty nice. And right now, after the login process, we can redirect users to the related dashboard. If it's an admin, we are gonna redirect that user to the admin dashboard. If it's a teacher, it's gonna be teacher dashboard. But how we are gonna get this data? If you remember, when we created a user, we added here the username and the password, but also you can add the first name and the last name. And there is one more thing here, and it's user metadata. So we can add our custom roles here. If you are using the pro version of Clerk, you can use organizations to do that. For each role, you can create different organizations. But if you are using the free version, you can do this using metadata. So I'm gonna edit here, and the role will be admin. I'm gonna save. And let's see how to get the user information after the login process. I'm gonna come back, read user and session data. And as you can see, on the server components, we can use auth and current user. And if you are using client components, you can use auth hook. And as you can see, it returns is loaded, the user ID, session ID, and the token. And also we have one more hook here, and it's called use user. And it's gonna return all the user information. Let's try. I'm gonna come here, paste it here, and import this hook. And let's see what we have inside. I'll say user, open my console, and as you can see, we don't have any user. If I say admin, admin, and as you can see, the user information is here. We have the user ID, user image, and inside the public metadata, as you can see, there is a role. So using that role, I can redirect my user to the admin page. So let's get this data and redirect our user. To do that, we are going to be using use effect. So whenever the user changes, we are going to run this effect and check the user role. Const role. If there is a user, we are going to check the public data and role. And if there is a role, we are going to redirect our user. To do that, we will be using useRudder hook. Const rudder. Remember, it comes from next navigation. I'll say push and the role name here. Admin, teacher, student, or parent. Of course, I should add rudder here. And let's see. As you can see, it opened the admin page. If I try to reach the login page, it's gonna open the admin page. Let's create other users and test it. By the way, we couldn't save the first name and last name, but it's not important. Let's say teacher, teacher. I'm gonna ignore the password rules. Student. And parents. Let's give the roles. And the others. Okay, let's test it. I'm gonna log out. Let's say teacher. And we are on the teacher page. Let's see one more time. And after we can protect our routes. And perfect. It works. So what about middleware? Let's open up the documentation. I will come back and let's click here, protect routes. And as you can see, by default, our middleware is not protecting any route. So if I log out and try to reach the admin page, as you can see, it's visible. To prevent this, we are going to be using create route matcher. So you can basically add here your protected routes like admin page, teacher page, and create your own rule here. You can say if it's protected route, just use the authentication and its protect method. And it will automatically redirect users to the sign-in page. Let's try. I'll open my middleware. I can delete this. Let's import this matcher. And I will say admin and teacher. I'm gonna refresh the page. And since we didn't define our sign-in URL, it's gonna redirect us to a pre-built clerk page. To prevent this, I will open my env file and I will say next public clerk sign-in URL. And it's gonna be the home page. Let's see again. I'll say admin. And as you can see, we are not allowed to see the admin page. Or teacher, we are not allowed, but we didn't add the student page, so we can see here. So this is how middleware works. But in our application, we are gonna need more than that. We have to check the user role, and also we have here different list pages. If we are the student, we can see only these pages. If we are the admin, we can see all the lists. So basically, for each page, we are gonna need different rules. If you remember, in our application, we created here the settings file. And inside this file, I'm gonna create a list that includes all the pages and the user roles. As you can see, if we are on the announcements page, even if we are the student or parent, we will be able to see this page. But if we are on the teachers list, for example, we can see that page if we are an admin or teacher. And those are our home pages. Only related roles can see those pages. So using this access map, I'm going to define different rules. And remember, this is an object, so I cannot use array map. Instead, I'm going to be using object keys. Let's say const matchers object.keys. By the way, you can find this in the GitHub repository. You don't have to write from scratch. And I'm going to pass here route access map. And right now we can use map. And for each route, we are going to return the matcher. And right now we can use this function and pass here our route. And also I'll say allowed roles, route access map, and route. Let's see what we have inside. I'm gonna comment this out for now. If I refresh the page, open my console, you are gonna see that we are on the exams page. That means every user can see this page. And right now we can get the user role. To do that, we are gonna be using this auth function, and it includes session claims. Oops, there's a typo, session claims. Let's see what's inside. I'm gonna log in as a teacher. Open up my terminal. And as you can see, it includes a bunch of items here that is related to session, but also I want to add here the metadata so we can reach user role. To do that, I'm gonna open up my dashboard, choose sessions, and I'm gonna customize my token. And as you can see, there are many options here. You can add different fields, but in our case, I'm gonna add the public metadata. Let's say metadata, and it's gonna be user public metadata. Okay, let's save. And right now, we can see the role because it's inside the public metadata. Let's try again. I'm gonna refresh the page. And this time we have here the metadata, and that includes our user role. Let's take that role. Const role equals session claims dot metadata, of course, if it exists, and role. Of course, it's gonna give an error, TypeScript error, because it doesn't ensure if we have the role inside metadata. To prevent this, I will say it's an object, it includes the role, and it's a string. And if our role is inside this allowed roles array, we'll be able to see that page. Let's do that. I'll say const get all the matcher and allowed roles from our array. And I'll say if matcher request and if allowed roles doesn't include our role, and I'll say we are sure that it exists, we are gonna redirect the user because it's not allowed. To do that, we can use next response. I'll say redirect new URL, and we are gonna redirect user to the role page. Let's see. I'm gonna try to reach the admin page, and as you can see, it opens teacher. I can see assignments, events, announcements, but if I try to see subjects, for example, as you can see, I'm not allowed. This is how it works. And of course, you don't have to use this map field. You can just create every single route using create route matcher. But in this case, you are going to create almost 20 routes. To prevent this, I just created this access map. We are going to map through our items and check the user role for each one. Right now, we are authenticated. We have the user role. So let's change our data in the list pages according to user role. And also in the menu, we don't have to use this temporary data anymore. Instead, let's use the current user. I'll say const user await current user. In this case, our component will be async, and it includes our user role. I'll say user public metadata dot role. Let's say as string. And right now, as you can see, there are more items, and also I can fix here. I will open the navbar, and I will do exactly the same thing here. Current user. And here is gonna be user public metadata and role. Okay. And as a teacher, we can see all the teachers, we can see all the students and parents, but when it comes to exams, we should see only our exams, not other teachers. And also, as a teacher, we should be able to create a new exam. So let's handle those buttons first, and after we are gonna make changes in the fetching function. I will come here, close them. So let's start with the first list, announcements. As you can see, only admin can update or delete the announcements. I'm gonna delete here. And inside the HTML, again, only admin can create an announcement. So we will not have any changes here, but we are gonna take this role from the authentication, not this temporary data. I'm gonna delete here. And here, let's say const session claims. That comes from auth. I'm gonna take the role. And I'm gonna copy here. Let's open the page. As you can see, nothing has changed. By the way, since we don't have any actions, we don't have to see this actions column. So I will say, if the role equals admin, the structure this array, in this case, we are gonna have this field, nothing will be changed. But if we are not the admin, we are gonna structure this empty array. That means we are not gonna have anything. I'm gonna save. And as you can see, it's gone. Okay. So let's take care of the assignment. Again, I'm gonna paste this here. Import this. We don't need this role anymore. Actually, instead of doing same thing again and again, let's come here and inside library, I'm gonna create a new file. And I'm gonna paste it here, import, and I'll say export const role. Let's remove this. And here. And let's import our role. I can do the same thing here. That comes from library and utils. I can delete here. And for the assignment page, as you can see, admin and teacher can create an assignment. By the way, there is something wrong here. It should be like that. Let's see. Okay, as you can see, the button is here. And also we can see the update and delete buttons, but there is something important here. As you can see, those assignments don't belong to us. We should see here only our assignments. So let's change our query. And if you remember, we have here the URL params condition, and I'm gonna add one more condition here. And it's gonna be role condition. Let's say conditions. And again, I'm gonna be using switch case. This time we are gonna check our role. And again, that comes from library and utils. And I will say, if the role is admin, we are not going to have any rule. If the role is teacher, we are going to update our query. And if you remember, inside the assignment table, let me actually open my schema and close this menu. And here we have the lesson. And inside lesson, we have the teacher ID. So we can use our ID here. In this case, we are going to also need our user ID. So let's say export const current user ID equals user ID. Okay, we can use it here. Dot lesson dot teacher ID, and it's going to be current user ID. And there's a type error here. To prevent this, we can define our lesson. Actually, let's define this at the beginning here. Query lesson will be empty at the beginning. So we can directly update this just like that. It's going to be shorter. Dot subject. And here, I'm going to say we are sure that it exists. I'm doing that because to see this page, we have to be logged in and we have to have the user role. And if we are logged in, that means we have the user ID. I will say break. And we don't have any assignment, that because in our database, the user IDs are different. Let's change one of them. Teacher 6 will be our user ID. Let's get this from the Clerk users. I'm going to copy this ID and update here. And for student, I'm going to copy this ID and let's update student 8. And a parent. Let's say parent 4. And it's going to be this ID. Let's see again. Okay. And right now, if I refresh the page, you are going to see that our assignment is here. And the teacher name is teacher number 6. Just like that. And right now we can update our assignments. We can delete it or we can create a new one. What about if we are the student? Inside the assignments, again we are going to be using lesson, but this time we have to check the class because inside the class we have the students. And inside the student list, we are going to search for our user ID. So let's create one more case here. If it's a student, I'll say query.lesson.class. And let's say its students should include our ID. So I will say some ID will be current user ID. So let's open assignments. And as you can see, we are going to have only 2 items. and our class is 3A. Let's check. Student. This is our user. And its class is, as you can see, 3A. Okay. And I can do the same thing for the parent. I'm gonna copy this and paste. If it's parent, lesson class students, sum, but here is gonna be the parent ID, because inside student, we can reach the parent ID. So we will be able to see all our children's assignments. By the way, don't forget to add break. Okay. It can look a little bit complex, but we are not actually making here any expensive calculation. We already have the role, and according to that role, we are gonna run only one case. And even if you have nested tables, it's not a problem, because in our database, we will not have millions of records or something. It's just a school management application, so you don't have to worry about them. And again, if we are not the teacher or admin, we don't have to see actions. I will do exactly the same thing here. If the role equals admin or teacher, we are gonna spread this array. In this case, we are not gonna have the actions column. Okay. And what's next? Let's open our menu and open up the classes. I can delete this data and role. And import my role here. And in this case, we can create a new class. If we are the admin, it can stay like that. And here is gonna be the same. But as a teacher, we can see the classes. So we can delete this action column. I will say if role equals admin. Okay. And the next one is events. Again, only admin can create a new event, delete or update. And I'm gonna remove this role and import my role from the library and utils. Okay. But if you remember, an event can have a class. So if we are the teacher, we are gonna see all the general events and also the events that belong to our classes. And again, if we are the student or parent, we will be able to see all the general events or that student's classes events. So let's write our conditions here. I'll say role conditions. Again, you can use switch case. We are going to check the role. If it's the admin, we are not going to have anything. If it's the teacher, the query, and I'm going to be using OR. That because, as I said, if there is no class ID, that means it's a general event, so we can see them. In this case, I will say if the class ID is null, fetch them. And also, if the class is lessons, and I'm going to be using sum, and the teacher ID will be the current user ID. And we are sure that it exists. And you can do the same thing for the others, but since we are using exactly the same thing again and again, let's do something different here. I'm gonna remove this, and I will say const role conditions. I will say teacher, lessons, some teacher ID will be current user ID. If it's student, we are gonna check students directly, and some of them will be our student ID. And if we are the parent, again, class students, and some of them will have our parent ID. So right now I can use this inside my query. I'll say or, and right now I can say if the class ID equals null, or if the class table meets our condition here. So I will say role conditions, and we are gonna pass our role here. And if it doesn't exist, that means if we are the admin, it's gonna be an empty object. Let's write here a type to get rid of this TypeScript error. Type of role conditions. Okay, so our query will be here. Let's see. And right now we can see only event2 because it belongs to our class. Let's create a general event. I'll say add record. General event 1 test, and we are not going to have any class. I'm going to save, refresh the page, and as you can see, we didn't put here a question mark. And you can say if it doesn't exist, right here, just dash, just like that. And we are a little bit late to join this event. Okay, so let's do the same thing for the announcements. I'm gonna come here. Copy these role conditions. And paste here. Let's import current user ID. And let's see again. And right now we can see the announcement 2 that belongs to 3A. And again, I can update my class name here because it's not required. And if it doesn't exist, it's gonna be this dash. Okay, so what's the next one? Actually, let's close everything here. Open my menu. And we have the exams. Firstly, I'm gonna delete this exams data and role and update my action. If the role equals admin or teacher, we'll be able to update or delete the exam. We'll be able to create a new exam. And let's fix here. Just like that. But as I said, we should see only our exams. Or if we are the student or parent, again, we are gonna see only students' exams. Let's see. It's here. We are gonna be using lessons. And it's teacher ID and classes. By the way, instead of doing this like that, let's create an empty object, because if we do that, each time we are updating the lesson, but we are just going to update the related field. And here, lesson.subject. Just like that. Okay. And let's create our role conditions. I will say switch case. We are going to check the role. If it's admin, we are not going to do anything. If it's teacher, query.lesson.teacher ID will be current user ID. If we are the student, lesson class students, and some students ID will be the current user ID. And finally, again, class students, some, and the parent ID will be the current user's ID. And here is gonna be parent. Let's see. We have 2 exams, 3A, 3A, and the next one is lessons. Teachers and admins can see all the lessons, but only admin can add a new one. By the way, let's remove this role and update